Hi, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of The Apparition, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a reading vlog of Simone St James's newest release, which is A Box Full of Darkness. So this is the most anticipated read for me. I've really been looking forward to this one. I love Simone St James and I'm excited to read something else from her. So after I am done vlogging this book, I'm going to do a tier ranking of all of her books, which I have finally finished reading her backlist titles. So I will go ahead and tell you how I feel about all of her books and which ones you can skip over and which ones I think you should really add to your TBR, because you're missing out if you don't. So I think I'm going to read a few chapters and then I'm going to go take my dogs out for a walk. And I will let you know my thoughts when I get back. It's officially springtime. The tulips are up. Okay, so I am back from my walk and I have read the first 3 chapters. So we're following 3 siblings and they have gone back to their childhood home because one of the siblings, Violet, she believes she has seen the ghost of her little brother Ben, who went missing when they were kids. They were playing a game of hide and seek and they never found him. He just disappeared. And so this is 20 years later and she's like, our brother Ben, he wants us to go back to the house. His ghost has come to me and he wants us to finally figure out where he is. And so her siblings, it sounds like they haven't really been in a whole lot of contact with each other. After they grew up, they kind of just went their separate ways. They didn't have the best of relationships with their parents or with each other. So, they kind of just spread out throughout the country and don't really see each other all that much. But they all loved and adored their brother Ben, and so for him and his sake, they are definitely willing to come back together at their childhood home, even though it does have bad memories for them because they didn't have the best of childhoods, and see if they can figure out what happened to him. So Violet, our sibling that can see the ghosts, she has the job where she'll go to different people's apartments or houses that have died, and they also have been estranged from their family, and so they didn't have anybody to leave their belongings to. And so it's her job to go and basically clean out their house and either sell off or donate some of the stuff that might be of value and then pretty much just get rid of the rest of it. And she likes this job, but it's also a little bit trying because she can see ghosts, and so a lot of times she'll see the ghosts of the people whose houses and apartments that she's rummaging through, and she's always there to find their secrets. She's like, people always have secrets, and as I'm cleaning out their houses, I always discover things that the ghosts didn't want people to know in life. And then the brother Vale, he's the oldest and he is kind of like UFO nut, and so when his brother Ben went missing, he swears he saw bright light. So he believes that his brother was abducted by aliens, and so he has made it his mission to figure out if aliens are real. And so that's what he does. He goes around interviewing people that claim to have seen these bright lights or have had encounters with aliens to see if there's any validity to his thinking that his brother was taken. And he's able to do all of this stuff because their parents were actually rich, and so they have a trust fund, and so they don't need to actually work for their money. And so that's how he's able to just travel around and interview people and not worry about his bills. And so the last daughter, Dottie, or I should say sister, because it's more about the siblings, not about the parents. But anyways, so the last sister, Dottie, she is a model and she can pretty well get by on her looks even if she didn't have the trust fund. And she apparently has had nightmares for a really, really long time about water. And it's always gross, disgusting water. And at first I thought maybe it has something to do with Ben's disappearance. Maybe he drowned or she thinks he drowned or something. But it sounds like she's been having these dreams before Ben went missing. So it's not really anything to do with his abduction or kidnapping or death or whatever it is that has happened to him, because she was already having these nightmares, and Ben would actually curl up in her bed sometimes, and that's the only nights that she wouldn't have these terrifying nightmares, is when her brother was with her. But ever since her brother went missing, there's nobody there to comfort her, and she just keeps having these bad dreams. So that's pretty much the setup setup for this book is we just have these siblings going back to their childhood home to discover what happened to their brother. But it has very much Haunting of Hill House vibes, the one by Mike Flanagan on Netflix, if you've seen that show. It kind of gives those vibes, where you have these siblings and they're going back to their childhood home. It just has that same feel to it, that same vibe to it, which I very much enjoy. I love that show. So I'll go ahead and update you when I get a little bit further in. So I've made it further into the box full of darkness, and I didn't realize it, but I guess this is set in the same world as the Sundown Motel. So if you've read that one, then you'll see some Easter eggs in this book for it. So I would probably read the Sundown Motel first before you read this one, just in case it gives anything away. But it does make reference to the Sundown Motel a couple of times, and so I didn't realize it was set in that same world, so that's pretty cool. And we've already had some ghostly happenings, which is what I look forward to the most. That's why I like ghost stories, is to hear about the ghosts and not necessarily just about the family drama all the time. But it does have plenty of that as well. The first little bit has been a little bit sad and depressing because these kids really didn't have a good childhood. They weren't like physically abused or anything like that, but they were kind of neglected, and their parents, they could tell, didn't really want kids, but they had kids, and they just kind of grew up kind of sad and lonely and only had each other basically. But everybody loved Ben though, and so everybody doted on him and loved him, and the three siblings pretty much raised him, and he was just like this bright shining star in their little dark, sad, lonely family world. And then he went missing, and so then their world came crashing back down again. So he was kind of the linchpin or the catalyst of their little family. And each of these siblings has their own reasons for believing that they're at fault for their brother's disappearance, and so they have a lot of guilt surrounding that day. And I think I've hit the first twist. I have to read a little bit further to see if I'm correct in my assumptions, but if the twist is what I think it is, then I definitely didn't see that coming, so I find that very interesting. So I'm excited to continue on. And one of our siblings, Violet, she is very upset right now with the police department because she feels like they didn't do a very good job at trying to track down her brother, and they were pretty incompetent. And she got his file. I won't tell you how, but it's very thin. Like, there's not a lot of information, and she's upset because basically the police thinks that either one of her siblings is the suspect. She's always been kind of weird and funny, and people don't realize that it's because she sees ghosts. They just think she's, there's something off about her. And so he believed that she had something to do with her brother's disappearance, and that the other siblings just kept quiet to protect her. And so now she's pissed off because she's like, you guys did nothing because you thought it was me, but you couldn't prove anything. So his case just went cold, and so she's just really upset about that, which as she should be. So anyways, I'm really enjoying it so far. I think it's really good. It's kind of slow moving, but it's not in a way that's boring. I'm very much enjoying getting to know these siblings, and like I said, we've already had a few incidents involving ghosts and things that keeps the plot progressing, and I've really enjoyed it so far. I don't have any complaints, so hopefully it will stick the landing. I'm about 2/3 of the way through this book, so I only have like 135 pages left or something like that. So hopefully I'll be able to finish this today or tomorrow. I am enjoying this one a lot so far. I enjoy the siblings. I think I feel the most connected to Violet. I'm not really sure why that is. They all seem to be getting equal screen time as far as like being in the POV or being in their heads, but I just feel the most connected to Violet. She's the one that can see ghosts. She actually spent some time in a psych ward because she, people think she's crazy, and when her and her husband got a divorce, he thought she was unfit to be a mother, and so he wanted her to do this assessment, but she ended up being in the psychiatric hospital for like 3 months, and she actually lost custody of her daughter. This isn't a spoiler, you learn this in like the first chapter, but I don't know, I just felt really bad for her, and because I like ghosts, I like ghost stories, maybe that's why I connect to her too, because she's the one that can see ghosts. But they all have their own things that they're going through though. Like with the aliens or the dreams or the, seeing the ghosts, they all each have their own thing that they've been dealing with since childhood. But I don't know, I'm just enjoying her chapters the most. There's even a little bit of a love story between her and the detective's son. I mean, you could say it's just friends, but I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit more. But Dottie also has a bit of a love story going on with this guy, Nathan, I think his name is, and I think it's really cute, and I hope it works out for them. It doesn't take up a lot of pages. It's not like this is a love story or anything. It's just a little dollop of romance, and I really enjoy that aspect. I think it adds some extra layers to the story and something that brings more interest to me. So I've enjoyed those aspects. And the town that they live in, the town of Fell, it's like one of these towns that's just always been strange and weird. And, people always go missing, or kids disappear all the time without explanation and in ways that doesn't quite make sense. And this is one of those towns that's just like very haunted, and the townspeople know that it's haunted. Like they would have a priest that hangs himself in the rectory, but then 90 years later, another priest would do the same thing in the same spot, and stuff like that was always happening in this town of Fell. And so these siblings, they can feel the difference when they're inside the house. They're like, it just feels different than being other places. And so sometimes when they talk about things, they don't want to talk about it at the house because it just feels almost like somebody's watching them. But anyways, I find that aspect of the story fascinating as well. I like small, creepy, weird towns like that. Is there anything else I need to talk about? Oh, and I was going to tell you, Violet, she keeps bringing up this entity that she calls sister, and we don't know anything about this person or this entity. And so I think that's going to be a major part of this story, is figuring out this new mystery that's kind of been in the background the whole time. So I'm excited to learn more about that. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say about it right now, but I'm going to go on a walk with my friend. There's like a little duck pond a few miles away, and we're going to go walk around the duck pond and catch up. I haven't seen her for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and go do that, and then hopefully tonight I'll get a lot more of this read, and by tomorrow hopefully I will have finished it, and I'll let you know how it went. So I've officially finished reading A Box Full of Darkness, and I'm proud and glad to announce that I think this is a new favorite by Simone St James. I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed the sibling dynamics, and I always love a good ghost story and a good haunting house tale. There is one aspect of this that I felt was probably in my opinion, a plot hole, but I can't tell you or explain what I mean without spoiling the plot. But there was one aspect about the ending that didn't quite make sense, didn't quite add up for me, and it was never addressed. But on the whole, I really, really enjoyed this one. And in this case, she made her ghosts kind of corporeal, which I thought was very unique, but yeah, also kind of weird. So I wasn't 100% sure if I liked that or disliked that, but it is something that most people don't do. Most people's ghosts are pretty ghostly, they're not usually corporeal. So I really do enjoy that she went a different direction and she did something different with it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really well done. So now I'm going to go ahead and tier rank all of her books. I have read all 9 of her novels and then her short story. And I'm just going to hurry and mention her short story. It's called Ghost 19. I didn't know if I should include this with the tier ranking because it is a short story and not a full-length novel. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it out, but just mention it. And I don't honestly remember this story that much because I read it quite a few years ago, but I do remember enjoying it, and I do remember liking the main character and thinking she was kind of fun and sassy, and I liked the writing style. I do remember thinking that, but as far as the actual plot of the story goes, I honestly don't remember, but I remember liking it. So if you want just something quick and light, then it would be a good one to pick up in my opinion. So Simone St James, she started out doing more historical ghost stories, and I always like a good historical horror novel, but then she switched and now she does more modern things, so it's more like supernatural thrillers as opposed to historical ghost stories. But I've enjoyed both, so I'm okay with whatever she writes. So let's go ahead and start the tier ranking. So I think at the very top is going to be A Box Full of Darkness because I just really loved this one. I thought it was so well done. But very, very close on the heels of that would be The Broken Girls. This is the first Simone St James book I ever read, and it blew me away. I loved the ghost parts. They were very creepy and atmospheric. I loved the mystery of it. I loved that there was a little bit of a romance in it. It just had everything that I love and adore in this kind of book, and I thought it was really, really good. So this one kind of combines that historical ghost story with a modern crime novel, and so, this is the best of both worlds. So we have one part that's set in the 1950s, and there's this place called Idlewild, I think it was called. Idlewild Hall, and this was like a place where the bad kids went. It was supposed to be kind of a reform school for troublemakers or people that, maybe had kids out of wedlock or they did things that were unbecoming of a young lady or whatever else, So the parents would send them to this private school where they would be reformed. But it was said that this Idlewild Hall was actually haunted. And so we have this group of 4 friends who kind of group together and discuss the ghost and stuff, but then one of the friends ends up missing. And then in modern times, in 2014, we have our main character who is a journalist, and her sister was found murdered on the grounds of Idlewild Hall, and everybody thought it was the boyfriend and he was convicted for it, but she's kind of thinking that there was something else going on and that it wasn't a coincidence that she was found dead on that land because it is haunted. So she's trying to dig into the history of the hall and see what's actually happened to her sister because she doesn't believe it was her boyfriend. So next after that would be one of her historical ghost stories, and that would be The Haunting of Maddie Clare. And this is about a ghost who hates men, basically, and she's afraid of men and she's angry at men. And so we have this man and his assistant who are ghost investigators, but because they know that this ghost isn't going to talk to them because they're men, they need to find a woman that's willing to help them out. And so our main character is in need of a job, and so they enlist her help to come talk to this ghost for them. And this also has a bit of a romance between her and the assistant. And I thought this was a really good one, a really fun one. If you like historical mysteries, if you like ghost stories, then I think this would be right up your alley. And this was set in the 1920s. Next, we have Silence for the Dead. And this is set just after World War II, so in the 40s. Or maybe it was World War I, but I think it was World War II. I don't remember. It was one of the world wars anyways. And we have our main character who pretends to be a nurse because she's desperately in need of a job, and she goes to work at this hospital that's supposed to help these soldiers with their PTSD and stuff. And I don't think they knew what PTSD was at this time, and so they just think they're kind of crazy or whatever, but she's there to help these poor soldiers who have come back from the war. And some people thought that this was really slow and there wasn't much to it, but I personally really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really fun and I liked our main character and I was intrigued the entire time. And don't you just love this cover? It's gorgeous. I love the house. I love the pinks and purples and yellows. I just think it's really pretty. And then next we have Lost Among the Living. This is the most recent one that I've read. If you've seen my wrap up, then you already know my feelings about this one. I read it like a month or two ago, but I really enjoyed this one. This is also set just after, I think, World War One, and we have our main character who is widowed. She believes that her husband was killed during the war, but they never did find his body. He was missing in action, but for all intents and purposes, he is dead, and so now she's a widow and she needs a job. And because they couldn't find his body, she wasn't getting the widow's pension that you normally would get, and so she's in desperate need of an income, and so she goes to her former mother-in-law and becomes her companion. And so she travels to her husband Alex's childhood home and, tries to be with his mom, who's kind of a cranky old bitter woman and doesn't treat her very well. But she finds out that Alex had a sister who was a little bit crazy or had mental issues that they couldn't handle, and they would keep her in the attic, but then one day she jumped off the roof, and so everybody believed it was suicide, but Alex didn't think it was, and she doesn't think it is, and she's thinking that maybe there was foul play and that she was pushed from the roof. So she's trying to figure out this mystery, especially because she can see this girl's ghost. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a lot of fun. And then next I would choose the Book of Cold Cases, and this is about this woman who has a true crime website, and she becomes interested in this case of the lady killer back in the 70s, where these two men had been murdered and these mysterious notes had been left with their bodies, and she wants to see if she can solve it. And she meets with the woman who is the supposed murderer and tries to figure out whether she actually did it or not. And there is a little bit of romance as well in this one with a detective, I think he is. And so I really enjoy that she puts a little bit of romance in her books. I know not a lot of people like that, but I personally enjoy it, especially if it's well done and if it doesn't take up the entire novel. I just like it as a side plot. But anyways, I really enjoyed the character of the lady killer because I just thought she was really a fun character and I enjoyed reading about her. And then on the flip side, I liked, being with the other girls so that we could figure out the mystery and have the little bit of a romance. But I know not a ton of people enjoyed this one, but I personally did. I thought it was really well done and really well written, and I liked it. This one, the ghost story isn't as prominent. It's more just little dollops here and there, but it was enough to be intriguing, and it was enough that I still liked it. And our main character kind of turned towards true crime because she was almost kidnapped as a child, and so that kind of stuck with her, and so now she's determined to try and help other people who have been part of crimes. So yeah, I thought this one was really good. I enjoyed it. And then we have The Other Side of Midnight, and this one's set in the 1920s during the spiritualist movement and during the time when people were obsessed with communicating with the other side and making contact with dead loved ones. And so our main character, she's actually a psychic, but everybody's convinced that she's a fraud, that she's fake, but she's actually not. And so we have this man who's trying to prove that she's a fraud, but then he comes to realize that, oh wow, she's not. And so he kind of apologizes, and then he wants to help her solve the mystery of other psychics that have been being murdered. And so they want to know if this other psychic that was murdered was killed because she was a true medium like our main character, or if she was a fraud and maybe somebody found out about it and wasn't happy about it. But I really enjoy the time period. I really enjoy learning about the spiritualist movement. It's one of my favorite topics to read about. I will admit that this one isn't super memorable. I read this not that long ago, but I keep forgetting about it. I keep forgetting what it's about. So it's not one that really stuck with me, and so that's why it's down lower on the list, is because I do really remember enjoying it and I really enjoyed the topic and the time period, but it's not super memorable at the same time. And then we have The Sundown Motel, and this is a lot of people's favorites or up there. A lot of people like The Broken Girls, but then this is a close second. For me personally, this wasn't a favorite of mine. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't love it either. I felt like there was too much going on, and I thought the ending had some issues and also wasn't the best written in my opinion, but it did have some really creepy moments. It did have some intriguing moments, and so overall I enjoyed it. But as far as the Simone St James books goes, it would be lower on my list because it just didn't, I don't know, it just didn't do it for me as much as the other ones. And at times I found it a little bit confusing because, like I said, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things that they're talking about, a lot of characters. So I don't know. Sadly, I didn't enjoy this one as much as other people seem to. From what I remember, I think this is about this woman whose aunt went missing back when she was a child or something. And her mom would never really tell her what happened to her aunt. And so as an adult, she's like, I want to figure out what happened to my aunt. And her aunt had been working at the Sundown Motel at the time when she went missing. And so she gets a job at the Sundown Motel so that she can figure out what's going on. And then we have an inquiry into love and death. And this is kind of like the Sundown Motel, where I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. This is another historical ghost story. And we have this woman whose uncle was a ghost inspector, that's not the right word, like a paranormal investigator. That's the word I was trying to think of. And so everybody thought he was very weird and eccentric, especially during this time period, that would be his job. But she always got along really well with her uncle. And he had gone to this island to look for this ghost and to investigate this ghost. And he was found at the bottom of a cliff. And, most people assumed it was an accident, but she is wondering if maybe it was foul play. And so she wants to know for sure what happened to her uncle. And she wants to know if it had anything to do with this supposed ghost that he was hunting down, or if maybe he met foul play from an actual human. So she travels to this island because she is the only one that really cares about her uncle. Everybody else kind of writ him off. And so when he died, she got all of his stuff. And it's really up to her to sort through his estate and sort through his things and his house and, get rid of things and keep things that she wants, the whole shebang. That's kind of been left up to her because nobody else cares. Nobody else wants to do it. But while she's there sorting through his stuff, she also wants to figure out what actually happened to her uncle for sure. So this one wasn't bad by any means. I really did like it, but when I compare it to all the other ones, it just doesn't quite meet up with them. It was just like, yeah, it's a fun time, but it's not something that totally swept me away, that totally enamored me. It was a good way to while away an afternoon, but it wasn't something that I'm just raving about and recommending wildly, I should say. And then lastly, we have Murder Road. And unfortunately, this is the only book of hers that I would probably say you can go ahead and skip it. I really didn't like this one. This was supposed to be set in like the 1980s, and I was really excited. Maybe it could have been the 90s, but it was either the 80s or the 90s. And I really wanted all those nostalgic feels, but honestly, it could be set at any time. Like there was nothing to really indicate the time period a whole lot, other than maybe a phone that's not a cell phone, but actually a house phone, or something. But by and large, like it could be set at any time. And the ghost story part was very, very minimal and didn't really quite make sense to me in certain aspects. And it was really, really slow, and I wasn't really invested in any of the characters. And there was these two sisters that were included that just felt like they were thrown in there for convenience sake because they just knew all the answers conveniently. And I don't know, I just didn't really like this one very much. So if I was going to say skip any of Simone St James's books, this is the only one I would say you could probably skip and you're not really missing anything. So this is definitely my least favorite of hers. So that's all the books by Simone St James. If you are new to her, then hopefully this tier ranking has helped you know which books of hers to prioritize, in my opinion. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.